Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a 160-day-old system of African nightcrawler worms, which were last fed 20 days ago, and it was 20 days ago that we ended this cotton towel composting test, and it was a piece of the same towel from which I cut this piece right here. And there was something a little bit weird about that last test because of the way I sort of put the towel into the system. Initially by just draping it across the top, sort of not near the food, but just more as a top covering. And that was 68 days prior to the end of the test, so to speak. And then at some later stage in the game, a few weeks later, I started actually sinking the cotton towel down within the food to get a lot more exposure, a lot more action. So I really started treating the actual composting of the towel starting with that point in time when the towel was right next to the food and stuff. So to me it just seemed weird, like I was maintaining two day counts for how long the towel was just sort of placed into the bin versus the actual number of days of composting. And I guess the other weird thing was that we didn't touch the towel. In fact, we didn't even excavate it. We sort of left it down there in the bed, and we would sort of excavate far enough until just a little bit of the towel was visible. The red was on top. As soon as we saw red, we stopped digging, then we piled the food on top of that, and that went on for a couple feedings. And then during the last check-in, we decided it was time to, go dig up the towel and see what kind of progress it's making, and lo and behold, it was totally gone. And I guess from the official point of view, 45 days was the technical head count, to where we could confirm that there was no more towel remaining, but it could have already been gone well before that, So it did seem to me like there were a couple opportunities to do that test a little bit better. Number one was to start off right from the get-go by positioning the towel down low where the food is. And then number two, do away with that whole idea of hands off and actually check the towel each time we would go in to feed the system versus avoiding it and not touching it. So I thought, what the heck? At 160 days of age, there's plenty of time remaining for us to repeat the test. And if it only takes 45 days for the worms to break something like this down, or possibly even less time than that, then there's a good likelihood that the towel might even be gone before the system reaches 200 days of age. So we're going to do another cotton towel test, same exact towel. Another chunk off the same exact towel that we used last time. Just sort of turning the screws a little bit on the manner in which we conducted the test. So I am curious to hear what people think in terms of whether or not I'm going about this next version of the test in a way that makes sense. Because then I think by doing it that way, we'll have a much better chance at seeing, what happens in terms of the towel getting broken down after it just gets placed right down there with the worms into the feeding zone with the foods. And we'll also be checking on it regularly rather than just taking that hands-off approach that we took last time. What I'm seeing here appears to be pieces of potato peel. If I'm not mistaken, potato peel was the majority of the last feeding. I skimmed through the video really quick just to see how things went last time, and I believe there were a few other things besides potato peel, but I believe that was the majority of what they got fed last time. And then this thing, something about it, I wonder what this is. Some sort of a synthetic material from the look of it and the feel of it, and the fact that it won't tear. So perhaps some sort of a sticker or label or something got stuck in here. I can actually read some of the writing on there. It says 13 years or 3 years or something like that. So to me this seems like this is the sort of thing that doesn't really belong in the worm bin, so I'm excluding it. So I'm going to just go ahead and start setting up their feeding zone here in such a way that it's going to include the towel right from day one. And it's going to be right down there with the foods that we give them today. So there's really no question as to whether or not the worms are actively on or around the towel. They're definitely going to be drawn to it because of the foods that we're giving them. Today, I think the main ingredient is cucumber peels and leeks. So here's some leaves of leek, and here's some portions of it, probably right there where you would cut off the portion that you actually include in your dish. And then over here is a whole bunch of the peels of cucumber, perhaps even a chunk of the cucumber where some of its seeds are visible, and maybe a couple other things, but I believe that makes up the majority of what we're looking at here. And the stuff just came out of my freezer. It's starting to thaw a little bit, but it's for the most part frozen, and as it thaws, it's going to become nice and damp and gooey, and it'll be the sort of thing that the worms are going to be able to dig right into and enjoy right away, hopefully. So I threw in a couple napkins or paper towels or whatever they were. I think we can also sprinkle in some of this nice leafy matter that was resting out on the surface. This seems like a real nice foundational bedding onto which we could place the food. But like I said, I'm really interested in making this version of the test a lot more realistic in terms of exposing the towel to as much worm traffic as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pile their delicious meal right on top of the towel, like so. And I think by doing so, we're going to almost guarantee that the towel is going to get a good bit of traffic. In fact, I think even taking a handful of this stuff and resting it on top of the towel after we've had a chance to fold it over might even increase the likelihood of a whole bunch of worm traffic being driven towards the towel. But you know what, before we cover up the food, I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of crushed eggshell so that the worms could utilize that as grit. And like I said, this stuff over here was set aside so that we can put it right on top of even more of the towel. So I got a feeling that this is going to be a really good start to this test versus, just completing the feeding and then resting the towel out on top. This way I believe we're going to see a whole lot more worm composting action. And here on top, I'm not really prepared to give them any other food in terms of sprinkling it out on top, but we do have a whole bunch of this nicely seasoned leafy matter that was just resting out on the top surface. Perhaps by including that down in the feeding, we can almost consider this stuff as perhaps not so much bedding anymore, but more as a supplement to their meal. So now I think we've definitely created an environment where this towel is going to get off to pretty much as good a start as possible. And I had one more napkin sitting here that I had hoped to do away with in today's feeding, so why don't we include it as long as it's here and ready to go. I'll just sort of cap off the whole feeding zone with that piece of paper right there, and then I think we're ready to backfill the feeding. So I'm going to use this backfilling activity as a reason to now go a little bit further out to the edges of the systems where we've not yet checked out how things look, to bring in some material and to aerate it. And by doing so, I think we'll have sufficient stuff with which we can thoroughly cover up the feeding zone. I'm definitely seeing a lot of castings piling up out here. In fact, almost nothing but castings. And for a system that's coming along in its age, 160 days of age, it's certainly got a ways to go as far as I'm concerned before it's complete. I mean, in the past, 150 days was often considered in my wormery to be a fairly aged system, one that would probably be ready for harvest. But over the years, I've managed to kind of change my thinking on how long a worm bin could or should go, and I think that I've kind of adapted to that new thinking by increasing the average age of my systems to long, possibly even double, but to long exceed the old standard of about 150 days. So I think from the point of view of this system, presently getting its, let's see, what was this? This was only its 14th feeding. So the system was fed 13 times. This is feeding number 14. I mean, I think the systems that I checked in on most recently, yesterday or the day before, I can't remember one of the systems that are among my oldest have been fed 25 times. So this one is, I don't know, probably a dozen feedings away from getting to the finish line. So we got plenty of time with these African night crawlers. So trying to think if there's anything I've skipped or missed. No, I think we're in pretty good shape. So why don't we leave it at that? I'm going to bring back the stuff that we were covering up with here. We had a feeding zone indicator, just a coffee filter to show where we last fed. And this piece of paper actually came into play during the last check-in, because up until the last check-in we were simply covering with nothing more than this piece of cardboard. But I figured perhaps a little additional protection from evaporation and drying might be nice, and that's the reason I added that piece of paper. And I like it, so I'm sticking with it. So that's it for our check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.